You're good.
I would like to call this town council meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the town council township... Oh, sorry, thank you. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land of which we gather is a traditional territory of the Ananashi, Bubiwaki, the Ottawa, and Mississaugas people. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for the July 18th, 2022 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Anita moving. I have Rick seconding. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Trevor?
Yes, thank you, Reeve. Might as well just look over here seems like every meeting, but anyway, I will be declaring a conflict of interest on 5.2.1, which is on the bills and accounts. Check number 508247 is made out to my spouse, Tiffany Sipe, for expense reimbursement as she's an employee of the municipality daycare center, and I will not be voting on the bills and accounts.
Thank you kindly. Okay, anyone else? Not seeing anyone, we'll move on. Public comments. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on an item of business that's on the agenda. 2 minutes per person. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Seeing no hands raised, we shall move on. Consent agenda. The Council of Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent agendas 5.1.1 and further that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.2 for information. Before I call that vote, would anybody like to pull anything out? Not seeing anyone. Could I have a mover? Anita moves. Paul seconds. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Okay, public meetings. Public meetings and hearings and delegations. Andrew Garland, MB Ross and Associates Limited, North Huron Water and Wastewater Capacity Update. Andrew, are you here?
Thank you, Reeve Bailey and members of council and staff invited me to be here as well. It's hard to believe it's been almost 2 years, I think, since I was here last to talk to you about water and wastewater servicing. So they say time flies when you're having fun. I guess that's what we're doing in the world of water and wastewater. Not only your own staff, but county staff as well. County planning staff asked me to come to just give a little update on the water and wastewater servicing scene in both Wingham and Blythe, and talk about what's changed since 2 years ago when we wrapped up the master plan. As a little bit of a spoiler alert, you'll see that not too much has changed in the context of available capacity and recommended capital projects moving forward. So am I able to control it from?
Yep. Yeah, your PowerPoint should be open at the bottom there.
Okay. So just a fairly brief agenda of items to go over. I'll just give a little bit of a terminology refresher when we're talking about water and wastewater capacities. There are different ways of looking at capacity, and even I look at this stuff every day and can sometimes still get confused by it. So I thought it might be helpful to go through a couple of the broad strokes on that. I'll talk fairly quickly about some of the background with the 2020 master plan and some of the findings at that time. And we'll talk a little bit about what's changed or what hasn't changed since then, and then go through a summary of the current findings, recommendations. So in the world of potable water supply, some of the things that we're most interested in would include the total capacity of your system. And really that's another way of saying the capacity when everything in the system is working. And that's the capacity under which your approval documents would be rated and tell you the system is good enough to provide X cubic meters of water per day. So that'll be related to what your approval and permit documents say. The firm capacity is a bit of a a belt and suspenders approach of looking at things, or a factor of safety, if you want to call it that. And that comes from Ministry of Environment guidelines. It's looking at the capacity of your system with the largest unit, whether that's a well or a supply pump, when the largest one's out of service, which could be for an emergency or maintenance, anything like that. So the ministry guidelines, again, it's not legislated, but their guideline would be that you have enough firm capacity in your system to be able to meet the demands of customers. We talk about maximum day demand. That's really what it sounds like, the greatest demand over a 24-hour period in a year, recognizing that there can be consecutive days of peak demand. You know, if it's hot out and people are topping up pools or watering lawns, maybe even when they're not supposed to be, those things happen, and that's often in summertime you see those consecutive max days. And peak demand would be the greatest short term. We're not too concerned about little blips that are only seconds long, but if there's an extended period of several minutes or several hours, that's the kind of peak demand that we're looking at. So when you have adequate storage in your system to be able to mitigate those shorter term peaks, then we're concerned about the maximum day demand. You can make up that difference between max day and the peak short term when water comes from storage. When there's insufficient storage to help buffer those peaks, then we're really concerned about can your supply keep up with that peak demand. In the world of wastewater or sewage, we use the terms interchangeably. The average day flow in this case is what would be stated on your approval documents, and that's really just the total flow for the entire year divided by 365 days. So any of your compliance or most of your compliance would relate to that number. And then a peak flow in this case would be, again, possibly several minutes, maybe hours, and that's often correlated to wet weather events. If there's a bunch of snow melt or rain that gets into your system, that's when you see peaks in the world of sewage. And so on the treatment side of things for sewage, where our greatest interest is that average day demand over the course of the year, though there are some systems, and the Blythe sewage plant is one of them, that also has a peak rating, even though they only express it in terms of a total day flow then, not the shorter term. And on the collection side of things, your sewer pipes, your pumping stations, we are concerned with that peak flow, because when the infrastructure doesn't have capacity for that is when you get into situations of bypassing or overflowing, or in a worst case, flooding someone's basement because the system doesn't have capacity to convey that sewage away. Going back to the 2020 master plan, when we get talking about the water and sewage capacity of your systems, there's really two things that we're looking at in the big picture. One is, how does that infrastructure meet the needs of your existing connected real-world customers? And then what kind of capacity is remaining for commitments, plans of subdivision, or people that have applied for permits to build something. They're not a real connected customer yet, introducing real water demand or generating real sewage flow. But to be sure that you've got sufficient capacity for those customers, we look at what level of commitments are there, or pending commitments, and then take it one step further. We'd look at what's remaining available for anyone that would come at a later date beyond what's already being looked at for commitments. And so for Wingham, at the time of the master plan, we looked at existing customers, and then 579 what we call equivalent residential units. Residential units come in different forms: single detached homes, apartments, multi-units. They all have a little bit of a different demand associated with them, mostly based on occupancy. But an equivalent residential unit we consider to be one single detached home. So at the time, what was referred to, I think, as A2A for some time, and then later Maitland Estates, represented 454 equivalent residential units. And then we also had 100 units at that time looked at for Hutton Heights for servicing, and then an allowance of 25 infill lots throughout the community. So 454 plus 100 plus 25, that's how we got to the 579. And then also considered the cross-border servicing agreement with Morris Turnberry at that time as well. In Blythe, the value of 125 ERUs came from, at the time, the Rutledge subdivision, or I think maybe it was GJAJ at the time. 100 units was what was allocated there, and 25 lots again for infill development. So that was the basis of the analysis during the master plan, what kind of infrastructure would be needed to service the existing customers plus those additional development commitments. And what we found going through the master plan was that for the community of Wingham, with the water system, the firm capacity, so again, that's the capacity with the largest well or pump out of service, would be sufficient for the existing customers and development commitments if sufficient storage was provided, because in that case, you just got to meet the max day demand, not the peak short-term rate. And so the recommended project coming from that was to increase the quantity of available water storage, which led to looking at replacing the standpipe and adding the booster station there in town. In the wastewater situation in Wingham, for the treatment plant, the capacity of the treatment plant was considered to be sufficient for existing customers as well as the commitments. The Josephine Street sewage pumping station, at the time it was identified that peak flows, even though infrequent, were about equal to the pumping station capacity, and in fact there was the odd time where there'd be a bypass or an overflow, but nothing too serious at the time, but the idea being that if peak flows were to increase, you'd want to increase the capacity of the station. And then the collection sewer, the northwest trunk sewer, there are a few sections of that sewer that were identified, and even preceding the master plan, identified to be pretty well at capacity, not the entire stretch of it, but certain portions of it. For the community of Blythe, the water system, the firm, because there's very limited water storage there, we looked at supply under peak demand as well as max day, and the firm capacity there was sufficient for max day, but for existing customers, but not once development commitments were factored in. And then looking at peak demand with the lack of storage was insufficient for both existing and their projected needs. And so the ways to address that, the most expedient and lowest cost one would just be to add a standby well at the well 5 site, because the thought there is that if one of the wells then is offline for maintenance, for emergency, the other one's online and the site's still able to generate that rated flow. So again, that'd be the quickest and most cost-effective way to handle that firm capacity shortfall. And then eventually, not just for capacity needs, but also looking at fire protection and some emergency storage, eventually adding more dedicated water storage was a recommended project. For wastewater, the treatment capacity here, based on that annual average day flow, which again is how most of the compliance is evaluated, was identified to be sufficient for existing customers as well as commitments. The peak capacity rating for the plant at times was exceeded, and to address that would require some additional study work to figure out the best and most cost-effective way to deal with that. You would probably do that in conjunction with looking at the main sewage pumping station in Blythe. There were times when that bypasses or overflows as well. There's no real point in increasing that station capacity if you just move the problem downstream and end up bypassing at the sewage plant as well. So it was recommended to look at both of those really together. What's changed in the last couple of years? If focus in that center column for a minute, that's looking at Wingham specifically. So back in 2020, a little over 1,500 water and sewer customers connected, or I should say residential units connected. For commitments, we had those 579 ERUs and the cross-border servicing agreement considered as commitments. Since that time, there have been a handful of residential customers added, and more significantly, some work at the south end of the community with the commercial development there. And then also, with some of the revisions to what's being considered for Maitland Estates, a higher number of ERUs for that development. So ultimately, the change in less than 2 years, we're adding, looking at about 151 additional ERUs to be considered as potential development commitments. In Blythe, 2 years ago, we had about 500 water customer units and fewer than that on the sewage side of things, and we had those 125 ERUs. Number of those ERUs at the time have been connected now, so added 30 to 35 residential units, but at the same time, the Rutledge subdivision has been scaled back a little bit in terms of the number of ERUs considered, so the net impact there is that we're actually about 46 or 48 ERUs less than we looked at 2 years ago for commitments. Water demands and sewage flows themselves. Won't talk about this in great detail maybe before jumping on to the next slide, but here are the values just looking at the last 3 years worth of data for each community. So nothing terribly significant, at least in our opinion, on what's gone on there. Interesting that sewage has actually declined in Wingham by a pretty reasonable number, but we think that's likely just due to climatic variations from year to year. You're going to see some changes in the wet weather flows there, and then otherwise things relatively stable in the communities. So to summarize what's changed since the master plan was completed, about 150 additional ERUs being contemplated in Wingham, decrease of just under 50 ERUs being considered in Blythe, and no really significant change, at least in terms of what would be a conclusion for water and wastewater infrastructure needs. No significant change in terms of what's been viewed and observed for the flows in each community. So at the time of the master plan, there were a few projects identified for water and wastewater infrastructure, and I've got listed here all of them that we're currently looking at, and then just where applicable notes that were identified at the time of the master plan. So in the world of Wingham potable water, the standpipe replacement, that was really priority number one identified during the master plan work, and so to continue working toward that replacement would continue to be a good goal for the township, in our opinion. For wastewater in Wingham, increasing the capacity of the Josephine Street pumping station, and also starting to plan and work toward replacement of at least key sections of the northwest trunk sewer. The priority there really just depends on status and timing of the development. I mean, like I said, that trunk sewer is in theory at capacity in some sections. The pumping station itself is as well. If you go and add 5 residential units, does that change things? In my opinion, not really, because on an average day when you're not having those wet weather flows, you got lots of capacity. On a wet weather event, does the additional flow from 5 units really have a great impact? I don't think it does, but But I also can't tell you what's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Is it then 50 units or something higher? I think that the takeaway, from my perspective, would be just to start planning for that replacement, but don't necessarily slow down some of the development being contemplated, just for the sake of that sewer, kind of carry on with both. For Blythe potable water system, the addition of a standby well at the well 5 site was labeled as priority number 2 in the master plan, and again, adding storage of sufficient volume could allow you to eliminate that need for a well, but storage is probably an order of magnitude more costly and also takes longer with EA work and approvals and all that compared to doing the well. So that was one of the top reasons for recommending the well as a more expedient, lower cost project. Storage still being something to consider. And for Blythe Wastewater, looking at increasing the capacity of the main sewage pumping station, but at the same time considering how are those peak flows then handled at the treatment plant if you were to increase the capacity of the station. So that was priority number 4 at that time. So that's really all I had planned to say. Thanks for your time, and I'm, of course, as always, happy to discuss any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns at this time council would like to approach him for? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve, and through you, hi, Andrew. Regarding pumping stations and increasing their volume, what do? You yank the old one out and put bigger horsepower motors in, or what?
Yeah, good question. As long as the facility is structurally sound, and usually they are, the concrete work and all that has a much longer life expectancy than the pumps and pipe work anyways. So as long as you can physically fit what you need for a higher capacity in there, modern pumps operate a little bit differently than the historic ones could, and there's often not a need for quite the same holding volume or storage volume in the structure. So most of the rehabs and upgrades that we've done in other communities for the last probably decade have involved maintaining that existing structure and putting some larger pumps. There can be a little bit of a domino effect these days with the impact on electrical upgrades. Codes change over time, and equipment that was rated as safe enough, I guess, at one time, now we get into more explosion-proof type equipment and that kind of thing. So there can be a little bit of a domino effect there, but in an ideal world, but I think most of the time we're able to maintain the existing structure and work around that.
Anyone else? Not. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. This is actually more of a question for the Director of Public Works than Andrew. Based on the information that we've received from BM Ross and Andrew's update, are we as council going to get an update, a report as to the status of those priority projects? Obviously, with an election year and those things, we want to make sure that we're following the priorities that we need to maintain. So I'm just wondering from Director of Public Works if when would council be getting an updated report as to the status of those projects?
Thank you, Trevor.
Through Reeve Bailey to Deputy Reeve Sype, yes, you will be getting an update report in the next few months. Stuff will come through. And I also we'll be able to provide updates in regards to the Wingham standpipe as well.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Just for Andrew, the plus 151 ERUs for that's our commitments. So that's above and beyond the 1557 that we have there, right? We have to supply another for the other 151 ERUs, right?
That's correct. That's just, and it's all, to my understanding, based on just revised plans of subdivision for the Maitland Estates property. So that's just a net increase in the number of units there.
Okay, so really that's only 1/10 of our total, I guess, so that's not going to affect anything in that part of it then, I guess.
Yeah, about a tenth of your existing customers, and then, but also so that 151, if you add that to the, was it 454 was the original number, so you're a little over 600 units in total then, just for that subdivision. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, Andrea, were you considering the apartment building with 70, 2 or 3 units? And Hutton Heights could be more than 100 with private ownership there.
In the, yeah, so good point. Maybe that 151 wasn't all just Maitland Estates. We've got a separate report, more just focused on Wingham, but a little bit more in depth. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see that, but if you're interested in it, I've got some summary tables that really break down all of the different developments and the number of units that were factored into the analysis. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I think, it'd be interesting to see, to understand what those commitments are more as a more convenient, but I think we have to recognize Maitland Estates is right back to square one. Like, it has no site plan, it's got nothing. So there's a long time between start to even development on that particular property. So, I mean, I think what I get out of this, this update is, there's priorities in this master plan that we had, that standpipe replacement, those things, that actually, the further we get down those priorities, I think we're in better shape. Because we don't actually have that commitment of 400 potential units, and probably won't, and in all reality, the next council won't even have that commitment. I mean, that's a 10-year, like if you look at what we dealt with, it was over 10 years by the time it was even starting to become developed potentially. So, I mean, there's a lot of work that has to go into that depending on how the change made. So I think, based on the changes that have happened, some to the good, some to the not so good in development purposes, but I think from a planning perspective of our waste and water in Wingham and even in Blythe, I think we're actually in pretty good shape in the sense of where our infrastructure is and what those priorities need to be. We just got to make sure that we don't sit on our loins and wait for that. Because, I mean, if development really happens within the next 5 or 7 years, we're going to need to be down the pipe already with those investments, because a lot of the investments that we're talking about in that master plan are not tens of thousands of dollars, they're millions of dollars, right? So, I mean, we're okay now, but I think we've got to push it along, and I think that's where, Andrew's update, in the Director of Public Works bringing that update back to council, I think it's only going to make those priorities and the budget deliberations for the next council to be even more heightened, because those investments in infrastructure are going to have to come sooner rather than later.
Thank you. And I would just follow up that with saying, yes, we've been 3.5 years trying to get water out to Hutton Heights. We're finally going to have it there this fall, or start this fall. I've kind of lost track, my apologies. But that's what we don't want to run into as a council. We want to be one step ahead instead of 3 steps behind. So we know that what we've gone through in our sitting council just to get the water there to start the development. The proper way to do it is to have the water there ahead of the development. Then we're not waiting 3 years. If that water line would have been put out there, and it's not nobody's fault when I say something like this, because it's been 25 to 40 years, whatever it's been, and priorities come and priorities go. So nobody is complaining about previous council. I'm just suggesting that with the change in the world, the way the world is now and what's happening around us, we need to get ahead of the game. We need this guy to be coming and saying that water's going to be ready to go in 2 years for the next development, even though we're just starting this development now. We've spent too long waiting for something to come around and then reacting, and this council has changed that. We're the ones that changed that. We are now getting Hutton Heights ready to go. We understand the problem with the A2A land, and we've changed that. We are getting ready to go for the next council to go. But we never need to stop now. We should continue all the time with that. It's just part of business, guys. Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. Andrew, thank you very kindly for your update. We do appreciate it. Look forward to the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Our next one is 6.2, Jason Yonan, Inspector, Detachment Commander, Huron County OPP, Huron OPP Statistics Report for the Wingham Ward. Gentlemen, if you don't mind coming up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You ready?
We are, my friend.
Okay. I'm gonna stand up if you're okay with that.
Yep. Kevin?
I believe,
Yeah, your PowerPoint's on there
Loaded
too,
already?
Jason. It'll be open at the bottom. See questions.
I'll shut this one down.
I think it's that PDF.
There we go.
Yep.
You're right.
There it is. You don't want that right on there. Oh.
You're not paying your electricity bill.
Oh, it just needs to be plugged in.
You have a cord?
Oh, yeah, I don't actually know whether that light there works even.
No.
Well,
We'll leave the lights on then.
let's just see how, we can shut them off. I should be able to, excellent night vision. We should be able to make do.
We have it on
Otherwise,
there.
you probably won't be able to see that.
No.
You've got it all in.
We have it on there.
You're cheating, I see.
We just want the audience to be able to see it, my friend.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Jam-packed.
It's all the people here. Yes. Excellent. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to address council this evening. And to my right, from the OPP's Municipal Policing Bureau, is Staff Sergeant Ken Key. And he's brought along to his right Sergeant Rob Griffin as well from the Municipal Policing Bureau. So, having had some communication with the Police Services Board and the CAO, I understand you're looking for a little bit of an update, and I'm going to provide a little policing update as it relates to the operations of the Huron Detachment, relating specifically to Wingham and a little bit of North Huron, and how things have changed in the last few years since Council decided to move over to the OPP and disband the Wingham Police Service. So I'm certainly open to any questions. Hopefully I won't be too long, and I'll try to keep this as brief and succinct as possible. If there are any specific questions in relation to dollars and cents and in the actual function and the manipulation of the actual billing model, I will defer to Staff Sergeant Key, and I will defer to Sergeant Griffin. Sorry, I just meant his first name. So the first slide.
Just a question for you before we start. Would you prefer questions as we go along, or would you like us to wait till the end for any questions?
Probably till the end.
Good, I'll watch it too then.
You have a question already?
No, I don't have to look for questions then.
Okay, fair enough. So the first slide is pretty much irrelevant because it's just my name. This way. So the first slide you have in front of you is just an overall OPP statistical analysis of the hours that the OPP has spent in certain areas of your ward. And I took from 2019, of course, in February of 2019, the Wingham Police Service was disbanded and the OPP came in with its integrated service delivery model. So you can appreciate a little bit of how many hours we spend in the town of Wingham, and specifically, and I gave a comparator for the township of North Huron as well. So I'm not going to read all of these numbers to you, but what I can tell you, as you can make the same deduction that I can in using mathematics, is the town of Wingham really accounts for approximately 3.5% per year of the total hours of policing in Huron County. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. And based on the current detachment staffing levels that we have at our detachment, and I understand there was an obligation of the OPP to provide a certain number of hours based on the certain number of officers that came over from the Wingham Police over to the OPP. And of course, we report periodically to the Police Services Board. We have not been able to fulfill all of those hours for full-time equivalents because frankly, there just isn't that amount of work to be done in the town of Wingham. So I know I think the municipality receives a bit of a rebate because we can't provide that level of service because the work just isn't there. And that's just part of the transition phase of how things go. But if you look at our current staffing model and the numbers that we have, the number of hours that we have provided to the town of Wingham equate to almost 3.25 police officers. So there was a chief of police, a sergeant, and 5 constables that came over. That chief of police position was converted to another position for the OPP. So really, it took about 3.25 police officers to fulfill adequate and effective policing for the town of Wingham. So that doesn't negate, the supervision that it would take for officers to complete the investigations that they're doing and how they respond to calls. That doesn't account for the support from our criminal investigations branch. It doesn't include all that. That is just very raw, very objective numbers to say these are the number of hours that the officers have inputted through our daily reporting system, and this is the output of what you have received. So that gives you some county perspective, and then also gives you some perspective from the town of Wingham and a comparator to the township of North Huron as well. The next slide, and if you're a graph person, this will hopefully catch your eye. This is a graph that is extracted from the call for service billing summary model. So I report on this at each police services board meeting. Although the town of Wingham is just next year will transition over to the billing model if you choose to do so. This is what policing looks like under that billing model. So you can see the ups and downs based on 2019 to 2020, and I'll get down into a little bit more granular detail about some of these types of calls for service and how they impact your billing and what we do to mitigate, which may sometimes be perceived as higher calls for service in certain areas that are a little more expensive than others. But you can see the general trends of what the ups and downs from year to year. And I would say from year to year, some of the calls for service are pretty similar. There aren't that much of a variance. One thing I'll notice with you, your billing model trial, if you will, took place during the pandemic. So things look different during the pandemic from a policing perspective. I can tell you just from a county perspective, we're starting to get back into I would call the normal of policing. Certain pressures that we didn't have, certain calls for service that we would do during the pandemic are probably less frequent now. So a lot of provincial offenses, a lot of bylaw type of infractions are assisting other agencies. We did a lot of that, a lot of working together with public health, a lot of working together with bylaw enforcement, municipalities or otherwise during the pandemic. And so that might look a little bit different in your calls for service, but nothing certainly alarming. Things like property crimes, like break and enter. So when you had your stay-at-home orders, when everybody was kind of stuck in their house, break and enters from a county perspective went down because most people aren't going to go into somebody's house when they're inside their house. So some of those property crimes start to decrease, but now the trends are everybody's back to kind of normal, whatever normal looks like to you. And sometimes you're not home, and so break and enter, thefts, those types of occurrences are starting to normalize again as they have done pre-pandemic. The next slide is calls for service, and there's two aspects to this slide. One is what you see here is all of the calls for service for the entirety of the town of Wingham for the corresponding years. So you see in 2018 you have 86. So that's when the OPP came in and provided some assistance to the town of Wingham when you had your own police service. So 86 occurrences. So those aren't hours, they're actual occurrences. In 2019, you can see that they went up to 895, then to 901. So they've been pretty consistent in the number, that's the number of occurrences that police have responded to. That's not your hours of billing. That's not based on your call for service billing summary report. That's not what that is. That's actual police calls that the billing model will pick up most of those, and it won't pick up some of them. But it gives you kind of an overall trend of where things sit. So policing for the last several years has been pretty consistent in what we need to do to apply what we need to for the variety of calls for service in the town of Wingham. The next, I just took 2 slides because these are probably, I took 3 slides rather, the most relevant calls for service that the town would have experienced over the last several years, and provides you some trend analysis. It provides you a little bit of a map and some hot spots as well as to where your crimes are taking place in the municipality. So the first slide speaks to violent crimes, assaults, threats, assaults, sexual assaults, domestic disputes, and so on. I'm not going to read all of those to you, but you can see the number of occurrences that have taken place. Again, that's not the number of hours or billable hours. That is the number of occurrences that have taken place from 2018, actually. I went all the way back to present in the town of Wingham. So you can see where things are kind of red hot. I will tell you, and you don't need me to tell you this, but a lot of the activity, a lot of the criminal activity takes place on Main Street, on Josephine Street. The Police Services Board members are very well aware. So when you're talking about petty thefts, when you're talking about mental health act occurrences, when you're talking about confrontations, that's most likely related to people who are looking to steal something because they're intertwined with drug-related calls for service, they're intertwined with mental health and addictions. Those things all intertwine, and sometimes they climax down on Josephine Street because people are just trying to grab something really quick. So, so that kind of gives you the matrix of how calls for service take place in the municipality. So we are certainly alive to those violent crimes. I will express to you a little bit of a concern of mine, and I have done the same to the Police Services Board, is the recent trend, specifically in the town of Wingham, related to firearms occurrences. So that should cause you some concern. It should cause me some concern as well. And we certainly have built a plan and have built a response in relation to, I would say, the county concern, but specifically the town of Wingham related to the accessibility and the use of firearms. Again, all of those types of occurrences are intertwined with mental health and addictions. This county is prolific and renowned for its stolen vehicles, so it's property crimes. People take this car and they move it from point A to point B, sometimes at speeds of excess of 200 kilometers an hour or 190 kilometers an hour because they're trying to transport drugs, transport people. And that ends up in violent crimes. A lot of people who are involved in violent crimes have access to firearms, and they have propensity for violence. So those are types of occurrences that we keep an eye on, and there is a little bit of a trend that I am seeing, not only across the county, but across the town of Wingham specifically. You may have seen, and it's thanks to our integrated service delivery model, you may have seen extra big trucks sometimes in the municipality or in the area of the municipality. And that is us taking care of business to make sure that we make criminals as uncomfortable as possible in your communities. So no community member should live in fear. No community member should be concerned about those types of things. That's our job to be concerned about them. And we want to make those criminals as uncomfortable as possible in the community, specifically the town of Wingham. And so that's what we strive to do. The next slide, after violent crime, is property crimes. And those are the things that not a lot of us probably through our lifetime will experience a violent crime against us. Sometimes it does happen, but we are more likely to experience a property crime. So somebody breaks into your car, somebody breaks into your house, somebody steals something from your child or your husband or your wife or whatever it may be. Those are more prolific, more common occurrences, and specifically you can see the map There's certainly a lot more, so almost triple or quadruple the amount of property crimes than there are violent crimes in the town of Wingham for the reported period of time here. What you have enjoyed with the OPP and our integrated service delivery model is a community street crimes unit. So that community street crimes unit is a partnership between Huron County and Perth County. And we do a lot with Perth County because a lot of our criminal work, a lot of our mental health calls for service overlap, and a lot of the services, social services overlap here on Perth. So we have a 6-member community street crimes unit with a sergeant, and their entire job is to look at trend analysis when it comes to property crime, prolific offenders, drug crimes, and their job, again, is to make criminals put all the pieces together to find out who's doing what, and find them and hold them accountable for the crimes that they have been doing. So I just pulled off a few statistics for you just this afternoon because I thought it would be relevant. So in 2021, I just took 1 year. This community street crimes unit, and you'll appreciate how busy they are, just in 1 year did 551 occurrences. They executed 93 warrants. They did an actual 36 warrant service entry, so that means they actually went into a house 36 times across the county of Huron. They charged 273 people, and they laid 1,120 charges. So that's really 4 members, 4 detectives from Huron County, assisted by 2 members from Perth County. And I will tell you that I don't have all the numbers in front of me here today, but we are, it's not a good thing, but we do lead a lot of the community street crimes units in charges, in warrants executed. It just tells you that the criminals are alive and well in the community. And again, we do have the appropriate resources, something that you would not have enjoyed and reap the benefits of under your previous police service. You just didn't have the capacity. So now the community has that capacity, and now we enjoy a wonderful relationship with the Police Services Board and the municipality here through the writing of grants to provide better tools for the jobs that we need to do. So we've just been able to purchase some equipment thanks to the municipality and the ability to write grants to acquire equipment and to put that to use, to leverage technology. I'm sure all of us have received those phone calls sometimes in the middle of the day because your loved one has been arrested in Afghanistan or whatever and they want $10,000. So technology is being used by the criminals. We're using technology as well to combat some of that. So I applaud the municipality for their initiative in wanting to write grants, even though I wrote it. But it's a good partnership, right? And we want to continue with those types of partnerships. And all of that works in, and I'm sure council is well acquainted with the community safety and well-being plan. All of that works towards achieving some of the goals of that plan. So mental health and addictions, community security, all of those things work together towards a common goal. So, and again, I just reiterate, property crimes is a major, major issue and always will be a major issue in every municipality across the county. Property crimes clearance rates, I think, is good for you to know as well. The provincial average is about 25% this year. So when we clear off an occurrence, we can arrest somebody, charge them, bring them to court. Whatever happens in court is out of our hands. But the provincial average is about 25%. You're at about 22-23%, which is very good. Sometimes it's hard to catch criminals. Property-related crimes are very difficult to solve. It takes a little bit of time. And so I'm pretty content when the property crimes clearance rates are around 20%. So you're exceeding my expectations, which is a good thing. Other relevant incidences, and you can read them. I don't need to tell you or educate you about the crisis of mental health. What you have come into, again, I refer to the integrated service delivery model, is you reap the benefits of having a mobile crisis rapid response team. So we have 2 police officers, one of which actually was a former Wingham police officer, which is nice. But they work with social workers. We have a partnership with Huron Perth Healthcare Alliance, where we provide 2 officers. They work with mental health clinicians, and they go out and do proactive and they do reactive work. So the reason I mentioned proactive and reactive is the billing model is really split into kind of proactive, or the base side of the model, and the reactive, which is your calls for service, which equates to more money. The more reaction we're doing, the more call for service that are being generated, the more money it costs you. So the more we can do on the proactive side of policing, if we can help people in a mental health crisis, and it's not a call for service, but we go out proactively because we know these individuals and we get to them before the crisis, make sure they're hooked up with services and supports, whether it's family, whether it's community, then that equates ultimately to a lower bill, hopefully, if we're doing things right. I know it's not about dollars and cents when it comes to somebody's mental health, but at the end of the day, it is a stressor for every municipality when it comes to finances. So those give you just a relevant count of mental health, attempt suicides, domestic disputes, and again, you can see where the map, where the hotspots are for those types of occurrences. So that is, I believe, yeah, that's all I have prepared for you, just from an overview of the operations. I haven't really touched the billing model. There's certainly the CAO prepared a very well established, and I would say a relatively accurate document as it relates to explaining the billing model. There's lots of work left to do, and as the Police Services Board hears me every time I report, my goal is sometimes to turn your town upside down and to shake the trees to find out where the criminals are resting, and we don't want them to rest. We want them to be on the move, and we want to be able to grab them when we need to make your community a safer place. So, subject to any questions that you have, that's kind of an overview of what we're doing, what keeps us busy. I can tell you I'm extremely proud of the work that all of the men and the women at the Huron County Detachment do. I will tell you that when I compare our detachment to the other 15 detachments, and I know it's not about comparing, but I do anyway because they're like your kids, so you're proud of your kids. But we exceed a lot of detachments across this entire Southwest region in some proactive things like ride programs. Every year at the Festive Ride, we exceed and overmatch any other detachment in the county, and sometimes the province of Ontario. Some of the traffic initiatives that we do, we have provincial traffic initiatives aimed at speeding, impaired driving, distracted driving, those types of things. We exceed a lot of other detachments that are of comparable size or larger than ours. So you have at your fingertips, really, you have a police service comprised of people from your communities that work tirelessly. These guys and gals work the likes of which I have never seen since 2015 and coming to this county. So 7 years I have watched them work. They work without complaint. They work under very stressful conditions. They work in a very violent county. If you're not acquainted with the fact that your county in Huron is very violent, it is compared to other counties. And I'm just going to tell you the absolute truth. They are stellar performers. And again, I will bend over backwards to get them what they need. And I think we'll be on a better path even next year to be able to provide even more support for the officers that are here through equipment, through personnel, and through focus on criminal trends, focus on mental health and addictions, all of those things. So it's a daunting task to try to put it all together, but these guys and gals do an absolute phenomenal job, and I couldn't be prouder than all of them. So, subject to any questions you have.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to start with Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Inspector, you shocked me by saying we live in a violent county. I wouldn't have dreamt that, because I guess we just don't see it like you would. But regarding robberies, are any of them home invasions? That's a scary one. You read about them in the news, and it usually doesn't end well. So did we face any of them?
Yes, you do. Yeah, I would say they're so a theft, right, is a theft, stealing somebody. A robbery is theft with violence. So those are the things that you're speaking about. I would say not on the high end. But if I was to make a guess or stab in the dark, maybe 5 or 6 a year in your municipality. And what's important for those, a lot of times we find the people who do those. A lot of times robberies are related to, again, the drug subculture, right? I'm going to go to your house because I know you're carrying this amount of fentanyl or this amount of cash, and you ripped me off 6 months ago. Usually they operate in their own kind of criminal community, which is good, but still bad. So yeah, I don't have, I can probably look it up for you, but I don't have the exact number of robberies. But they do happen, home invasions do happen, but they're not, certainly not the norm, if that puts your mind at ease a little bit.
What can the homeowner do? Like, many own weapons. And, like if it was the States, you take care of business. Here, even I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah, so I mean, you can still take care of business, but you have to be within the confines of the law. So the law says that, that you can protect your person, you can protect property, but there are, even us, we can use force, but we're accountable for the force that we use, right? So if an officer decides to discharge their firearm in the course of their duties because they fear serious bodily harm or death, they're accountable for that force. So, and that equates to Joe or Jill citizen as well, right? If somebody comes in, I tell you, if somebody's coming to my house, then I'll take care of business, right? But you got to remember that there's always somebody tougher out there than you. Some of the good things that you can do, and some of the abilities that we have to help you, include sending officers to people's homes who are concerned about their house. So there's a program called Crime Prevention through Environmental Design called SEPTED. We have officers, every time there's a break and enter, we offer people the opportunity to have an officer come to their house, visit them, and have a look at their lighting, camera systems, if they have any, cut back these shrubs. It's called target hardening. So we want to provide, it could be dogs, could be, you should put a light over here, a motion sensor, because usually criminals like to operate in the dark. So those types of educating yourself. People want to get into your house, they're going to get into your house. But you just make it as difficult as possible. Lock your doors. I love farmers, and the bumper sticker says that farmers feed cities, but farmers in this county are notorious for leaving their keys in their vehicles while they're out in the fields. And that is probably my number one pet peeve in this county, because people grab those because they use them to commit crimes. Right? So my message to prevent home invasions, to prevent robberies, those types of things, is to do your part, lock your house, grab your keys to your truck. Don't provide an opportunity, I guess, is my message to those types of occurrences.
Thank you. Go ahead, Anita.
Yes, thank you, Reeve Bailey. You were talking about a lot about homeless people, firearms occurrences, drugs, mental health related. What can we as a municipality do to make your job a little bit easier? Because a lot of times when you catch criminals, they are set out for a day or two and then they're let go again. Is there something as a municipality that we can do to help you, or make lives easier for officers to whether provide services for mental health or provide more, I don't know.
Well, and I appreciate, usually the questions sometimes can be accusatory, so I appreciate the fact that you're interested in providing us assistance. With respect to the courts are the courts. The court system is certainly evolving and it's changing. And it's probably one of the number one frustrations that I have and our members have of arresting the same people. We dealt with the same person in another municipality not too long ago, mental health and addictions, 8 times in one day. So it's just a band-aid approach. I don't know if there's a lot as a municipality you can do with respect to the courts, unless you are, you feel provoked to lobby your member of parliament. That's certainly not coming from me, but that's difficult. That's difficult to do. Right? That is a different branch of the Ministry of the Attorney General, and they have their own challenges. Right? Overcrowded prisons, overcrowded jails, those types of things. The bail release conditions. There's not a day that goes by in our county, in your county, where there's not somebody or multiple people sitting in our jails, and we're holding them on the weekends for what we call a wash court. So it's just a weekend and statutory holiday court. So. What I would love to see when it comes to mental health and addictions is municipalities really come together. What I'm excited for, and hopefully the new police services boards, when they come together, as the ministry is designed for them to come together, that community safety and well-being plan that exists, that has very clear and definable objectives, mental health and addictions is a big issue. I know the municipality, I think I watched it on the news not too long ago, was moving on something to support homelessness, if you correct me if I'm wrong. But so those types of things, to give the supports to the people when they need them, when there isn't a crisis, right, is so important, I think, for us. We don't want to criminalize people with mental health and addictions. It's the last thing that we want to do, because we're not going to give them the help. We don't want to be the pointy end of the stick. So I have offered with other municipalities to create, specifically with homelessness, create a protocol where we work collaboratively. If you have a problem with homelessness, it may not be the police that is the answer. And I've likened it to a bit of a triangle. There's bylaw enforcement, there's social services, and there's the police. So sometimes that triangle needs to pivot. We don't need to be on the top of that, but we're a supporting mechanism there. So whatever support you can keep doing for homelessness and mental health is great. Sometimes there's grants for mental health, and we'll keep working with the municipality if you choose to do so under a Section 10 contract to work with the ministry to acquire funding to support those types of things. So, and again, you're all, there's an old saying that the police are the public are the police. If you can spread the word about locking your vehicle, locking your farm trucks, I covet your assistance for those types of things.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. And I think for us as a council, it's very important to spread the word in the community that the help for people with homelessness or drug-related problems, if they have a spot where they can go, that it will help prevent crime in the community. Yeah, I have another small question that's regarding to the high school presence you have right now. What is the plan for the coming year?
So currently our mobile crisis rapid response team members or mental health officers, they also do work with the schools. They're also our dual purpose school resource officers. I can tell you there's you can read the times of how larger cities have perceived school police officers in schools. Some municipalities, some cities have totally removed police officers from schools. I still see value and efficacy of police officers being in schools and developing relationships. We still do those things. So Jamie Stanley, Constable Stanley, he's in our schools. Again, our mental health officers are there. A lot of times, unfortunately, they're there for mental health reasons too.
Yeah.
Our teenagers, our children are not immune, certainly to mental health issues. So the plan will continue
doing that.
with that, and we try to do as much as we can with schools. Times are changing though.
Yeah. Oh.
Right? As the children become, I'll call them different, their minds change, social media changes their minds, they have a different perception sometimes of the police. And a lot of kids, a lot of children are much more vocal than we used to be years ago, right? So we try to keep working with them as much as possible. We did have a police youth advisory council. So we met with teenagers. We went to all of the high schools, and this is back when we had Wingham Police still. We still went to Effie Medill, and we grabbed teenagers and met with them. Cool story. One of the girls that was on the police advisory council actually was just hired as an OPP officer a few months ago. So that was a pretty cool moment for us to see. And so we would like to, I don't know if we'll be able to keep going with that or reinstitute it, but those are kind of the things that we have in store.
Great, thank you very much.
Kevin?
Thank you, through you. Inspector, I first want to thank you and your staff for the exemplary jobs that you guys do. It's much appreciated. My question is with North Huron having two separate policing models currently for different, for one for the town and one for the outlying. Is there any way of comparing the two as far as effect and outcome? Is an advanced or enhanced agreement, is one half getting a better product or a better outcome, effect and outcome, versus the other contract, in your opinion?
So I would say no. It depends on, there's so many variables, right? It depends on who's committing the crimes, where they're committing them, the time of day, those types of things. But what you're receiving is the same response, the same level of response in North Huron as you have been in the town of Wingham. And I would say a better response from 2019 moving forward. But you can certainly start to try and crunch numbers, and that's what these fine gentlemen can do for you to, if you really wanted a comparator to what, what the numbers are for policing, calls for service, and what that equates to a bill. And North Huron, you've already been under that service delivery model for the billing. So you can kind of have a look. I think the CAO has done some projections for you too. So, but from a policing response level, you get the exact same. If somebody's breaking into your house in North Huron, you're getting the exact same response as you are, and we will work equally as hard to find out who's done those crimes. But I could look at, if you get your clearance rates, if you wanted to see those types of things, but there's a ton of variables that exist. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, my question was just first, what does that enhancement get? If the response is the same, and the occurrences are more based on residency of a municipality or of a town. Bigger town's going to have more per person, but with the two, you say that the response and everything's the same on both. What advantage is it having the two rather than just having the one policy?
Well, I guess that's what you've been doing for the last 3 years. You've transitioned over to the OPP, and now you can see what it potentially would cost for you to have that model being used in the town of Wingham. So you can start to talk about numbers, and I'm going to let Staff Sergeant Key maybe give you some more information just about how that model works, compare it to the 5.1 model.
Yeah, so just to give you a bit of a clarity on that. So, I mean, and speaking to the inspector's earlier point, that the service delivery essentially is the same. What's different is the cost recovery method. So when you're in that transition contract period from the Wingham Police Service to the OPP, we are required to at least, essentially it comes down to activity data that we have to generate to allow us to transition the Wingham community into the billing model. So the service deliveries are the same, but it's how we account for those officers and those hours, and how we basically cost recover for those officers is what the real difference is. You're not getting an enhanced service per se in Wingham. In Wingham, you're getting a targeted number of FTEs under a contract that's based, but it's not like the rest of North Huron is getting kind of a lower base service compared to what Wingham is getting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it didn't clear much for me. I just, if both models would be providing the same amount of service, I just don't know why would one want to be paying more for the same service.
So let me just, I'll go back to the second slide or third slide that I had, because it might be. So the town of Wingham in 2019 had just shy of 5,000 hours of policing, right? North Huron had about 2,600 or 2,300 hours. And you have access to these slides. Town of Wingham, I'll just use last year, same, about 5,000 hours. North Huron, about 3,300 hours. So under the billing model, you're talking about calls for service and how that billing model functions by the sheer numbers of times we come into Wingham as a reactive call for service. That costs money, and you're not double, but there's just more activity in the town of Wingham, so that will cost more. Right? If that makes sense.
Yes, Cosmar, this municipality, if we had one service, how would that differ from what they have now? Like that proportion is always going to be there just because of the sheer population. So under
the new billing model, the way that you account for those calls for service is different than what it used to be for the last 3 years, right? It was FTEs. So.
Yeah, FTEs and the hours provided by those officers, not tied to calls for service. So activity data from those officers, what they're providing in that community is how we cost recover from. So come January 1st, 2023, you're getting the same service again. You might be getting the same amount of officers, or you might be getting more. It's not tied to a specific FTE number or enhancement positions within the community. It's more provincial based, a cost recovery model, basically. And those costs that are calculated are based on a lot on what provincial averages are, and then based on your property count. So it's an allocation model, which is a completely different cost recovery process versus what Wingham currently has now, which is strictly based on X amount of FTEs, actually just over 8 FTEs, including a DAC, detachment administrative clerk, for those specific positions.
So that's why you've been getting, every year, you've been getting a rebate, right? Because, so FTE full-time equivalent, that's like one person. So under this contract, or how you're operating now, is we're required to give you this many number of hours, right? And we've not given you that number of hours because there's not enough work for us to do that. So you, as a municipality, get a rebate at the end of the year once reconciliations and whatever are done. When it moves over this way, you shouldn't get a rebate anymore. It's strictly dealt on proactive, the billing side, the static amount that really doesn't change, and then the reactive calls for service. So the way you impact, whether it's North Huron or whether it's the town of Wingham, the way you impact your bill to decrease the bill is for us to work together to do proactive work so you don't have as much reactive work, because that's what generates the cost.
Thank you.
Paul, go ahead.
That's you, Reeve. Gentlemen, thank you for your input here, so much stuff. But I live in this nice quiet town you've been talking about, and and last year I paid $829. I'm going to $538 with your new way of doing it. That's saving of $291. How can I tell that older lady that she should be very comfortable, not live in fear? You know what I mean? What's $300 worth? You know, are we going to lose that $300 worth of?
So your service remains exactly the same.
Yeah.
So we could bump your bill up to $1,500 and make you really open your wallet. You get the same amount of service. Or I could say, you know what, it's going to be $1 now. The service does not change. Our response does not change. So to your neighbor's point, she needs to call the police when she needs to call the police. She needs to leverage every proactive program that we have to make her feel safe, and we'll do everything we can to help her. But that money, I guess, is money in your pocket or her pocket, but the level of service, my argument, it will be, and always has been, through the disbandment, you're getting not an enhanced service, but you have now access to a lot more resources than you did previously.
Then, sorry, another follow-up. I see in 2022, it costs the Blythe, or the outskirts here, $318 a home. And that's in 2022. It doesn't say the 2023 cost, but in ours, you gave us an estimate, and it is going to be the $538. If we're getting the same rate, why is there that goes from $318 per home to $538 per home up here where the heavy populace is?
Numbers.
Yeah, so, and I assume you're getting that number from the CAO's report?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So essentially, again, relating back to the way the billing model work is based on the number of properties. So and I'd have to look at the details a bit more closely, but it could be based on the increase in the amount of properties. Blythe might have a lesser amount of properties in their municipality. I'm not quite sure on the numbers. I believe the CA also did a billing estimator tool based on the calls for service.
Right.
Wingham will have probably an elevated number of calls for service compared to Blythe, I would assume. Again, I can't quote specifics, but that would be the main rationale behind the difference in those two costs.
Yeah, but maybe I'm not make it clear enough. I'm just wondering, like, we're just talking about the same model, and yet it shows here that you're charging the Wingham residents $538 per home. Last year it was $829, but under your new model it's $538. But in the Blythe and the East Wanash, it's $318 per home. Like,
So Sorry, sir. Yeah, and the simple answer is they're under a different cost. Again, the current Wingham cost recovery method right now is FTE based under contracts. Blythe is being cost recovered under the billing model, which is a completely different method of cost recovery that Wingham will be going into come January 1st, 2023. So we're talking about two different cost recovery processes at this point.
Okay, so I can tell that older lady that she's going to be, or older gentleman, that your presence is going to be still there, then, right? Yes.
Nothing will change.
Okay. I'm just looking at these numbers, and I was just wondering what the difference was, so
And actually, you should probably be able to tell him and her that things are going to get better.
appreciate that very much, sir.
And just to top up the inspector said as well, yeah, I mean, that's a common misunderstanding. I would say that because it's very often when we have new municipalities that transition from their current service to the OPP, again, we always have that 3-year transition contract that is based on this set amount of FTEs. More often than not, the prices do drop when they transition to the billing model, which again is a completely different cost recovery model. The assumption is the cost reduction then equates to a reduction in the amount of service and the reduction in the amount of services that is pleasing your communities. And that's simply not the case. It's a different cost recovery process. The billing model is based provincially on all the officers that provide policing services to all our municipalities. So there's a lot of averages that are involved, cost recovery shared amongst all municipalities. Again, so the costs are going to be reduced based on that type of method of cost recovery process.
So I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Sype, who sits on our police board, as you're aware. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. I have to admit, this is exactly the same questions that happened 3.5 years ago. Exactly the same questions. Because understanding what the billing model does and how this transition period was going to work is very difficult for an individual, an old lady or a resident to follow. Because, I mean, it's a different mindset of how policing is done. I mean, when we had the Wingham Police Service, we had the equivalent of 7 police officers right behind this building. And they were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they dealt with services level of whatever we had. No different than what we have today, what we're paying for today under our contract, but yet we're not getting that because the calls for service do not require us to have 7 people. That's the way I interpret this. When we talk about the billing model and what we're going to potentially, depending on how council perceives what this is council needs to decide if they would want an enhanced level of service, meaning they want a police officer in the municipality 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But those are going to have costs associated to those things. I mean, we've had 3 years of a transition period in which nobody has been barking down my door as a police services board chair, and I look at the vice chair, Mr. McBurney, and nobody's been barking down his door either to say our level of service has changed. We have a different model, but we also have a different level of resources that we didn't have before. Like, if everybody can remember, we had a murder in the town of Wingham that under our old model, we had no expertise to deal with that. And we would have had to pay significantly, potentially a significant amount of money in the future to have that resource available to us if we needed it. By having the OPP, I have never once, and I was the leader, so I can honestly say this, I was the leader of the physical discussion about change. The municipality had a Wingham Police Service for over 100 years. But again, doing the same thing just because you've always had it doesn't make sense if the level doesn't require it. And I think at least what I've learned over the last 3 years is, it was great to have that service, But there was a cost associated to that service that the municipality, Wingham ratepayers, were paying dearly for. And my argument is, and I say this to people all the time, if you need the police to be at your door, call 911. They will be there. And they're not coming with one or two, they will come with what they need. Arguably, does that resource, is that service worth $800 a year or $400, whatever? I don't care if it's $3,000. If I call 911, I want somebody coming because I need the service. So we have to recognize that emergency services is exactly that. It's a service that's required in an emergency. Nobody, at least from my perspective, I don't need a cop parked outside my door if I don't need a service. Like, that's the call. And I mean, that's ultimately, the new billing model is going to talk about, there is going to be a base coverage, a base cost associated to having that service, because as the detachment commander has said, and as the other individuals have said, we're averaging the whole province of Ontario. Not just the Huron County detachment, where it's the billing model averages everybody in Ontario. But then there's also a cost for every time you call 911 and want that service. So there's a fixed cost associated to it, and there's a variable cost based on call for service, which these calls for services over the past 3 years help you determine what your potential estimated overall annual cost is going to be. Is that going to be what your cost is going to be every year? No, because your calls for service are going to go up and down and potential. If we do, as the detachment commanders indicated, and be more proactive, maybe our calls for service drop. And I think that's what the Police Services Board is doing right now with the services and the help with the detachment commander and writing those grants and getting those officers the new access to those things that they could use on the front lines. You know, those are the things that we can do as a municipality, as Councillor Van Heersum says. What can we do to help? What we can do to help is be proactive, and what we also can do to help is have our residents call 911 or call for support if they need it. And if they don't need 911, call the non-emergency role. Yeah, you're not going to get an officer come to your door in 15 minutes, but he's going to come to your door. That's their job. But don't expect, if it's not an emergency, if I need an emergency and Councillor Van Heersum, or if I don't need an emergency and Councillor Van Heersum does, I'm hoping the police are going to her before they come to me. And our ratepayers should know that. But that is a frustration part, because people have an understanding and think that everybody should get the same level of coverage. If I am not an emergency and somebody is an emergency, well, why didn't they come for 3 weeks? Well, so I recognize that costing is an issue, and it has always been an issue. But if anybody on this council remembers, previous to this council, our cost for policing was going to be well over $2 million. And that's not the Wingham Police's fault. Nowhere are we should be saying that what the Wingham Police Service did for this community was exemplary for over 100 years. Nobody has ever said that. But it also has to recognize that it's not the cheapest form of policing in a municipality of 3,000 people, or a town, or one ward of a municipality of 3,000 people, when you have other wards that are using the other model. So how it's going to change, and I think we're getting it more into the report of what the CAO is, and I think those are some of these questions that we can talk about when that relates to. But we have to recognize as a municipality, the town of Wingham was paying for their service because that's the contract that they were in, as well as East Wawanosh was paying for theirs, as Blythe was their contract. I think we have to recognize that if we're all on one, it's not going to be area rated anymore, people. That's reality. Because everybody's going to have the same level. Yeah, we're all on the same thing, but we all have the same other things. So that has nothing to do with the billing model, but I just wanted to reiterate some of the questions and some of the comments that are being raised. These are good questions. These are good comments to have. because we have to determine, we have to give staff whether we want those enhanced things in the municipality. But I can tell you what we've been doing at the Police Services Board. There has never been a request, other than more foot traffic down Main Street in Wingham. That would be the only thing we've asked for. And if you can see the graph, it makes perfect sense. So I think we're at that position now, and I think, you know, the comments about what it's going to cost us, these are all real questions to have. But cost isn't the only answer to the question. Because if that's the only answer to the question, there's going to be a lot more questions about this question about service and what we're getting. That's the question. That's the comments that I have, Reeve.
Thank you very kindly. Chris, I'm going to give it to you, and then I'm going to wrap it up, okay?
Yes. I might be saying what you're going to be saying. I'm wondering if we should acknowledge this this report, and we've already moved into 7.6, item 7.6. Would it make sense to tackle 7.6.1 and 2 now while we have the gentleman here and we're all hot with questions and things?
I think we'll just leave our council agenda set up. I believe I have to anyway. I don't believe I have a choice, but even if I did, I think we'll just continue down the road we're going and have that conversation in a few minutes.
Okay.
Just so Bernie doesn't get confused. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very kindly. This has been quite a change. As some of you gentlemen may have known, I was one in the audience when I was against the OPP taking over. I thought the Wingham Police Force should do the all of here North Huron. Till I got into the numbers, till they threw that whammy at us. We cannot afford those numbers. I am very pleased with the OPP and what they're doing. I want to thank you, gentlemen, and thank your officers and your staff for the support you're giving us. We are headed to the billing model, as we've spoken about here tonight, like the rest of Ontario. We will be a community of one, and we will all be paying into the same ability to get the same police officer anywhere in Huron County when we need them, and that's the bottom line. Okay? So I want to thank you guys. Unless you've got something more you'd like to say, I really appreciate you coming out. It was a very well talked out issue, and we're going to let it go at that. Okay? Is it really serious?
It is actually a question about grants.
Okay.
Okay, because it's going to lead into the conversation at 7.3. So, because we've issued, the Police Services Board has got a grant, and I believe that grant is for 3 years. If we move to a 5.1, does that grant, like, we are required to repay that grant? Is my question. Like, under the if you've succeeded in a grant because you were in that model at the time, are you grandfathered to continue to have that money available to you until at such time where that money is now that you've signed an agreement for that grant? But then yes is the question, because I think that is a realistic question that we got to talk about, because that grant particularly is a grant that we did in order to support calls for service. So, I mean, I want to just get a sense of where your guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so very, very high level. I mean, I think the idea behind going to a 5.1 is, yes, you would be ineligible for those grants. The question is how the ministry would recoup that back. I can't answer that. We don't get involved in any sort of grant applications considerations. We can certainly offer that assistance. But my best advice to consult, I believe, it would probably be the Police and Services Advisor for the area. I don't know, is that Dwayne?
With me,
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
just contact the ministry and say, if you went to 5.1, would you claw back? I can't give you a concrete answer. I highly doubt it, because you entered into that agreement when you were a Section 10, and politically, practically, it doesn't make any sense. But I can report back.
That
Yeah,
being said,
the ministry
too,
would
the one other comment I would have is, so under the new policing legislation, there will no longer be 5.1s. So ultimately, all those grants with any municipality are going to have to transition to the detachment board, police services board model anyways, right? So my initial guess would be that the new detachment boards would assume responsibility for that.
I think that's just, I think it would be, I know we're not gonna make a decision right tonight, I know that's the reason, but I think based on what we've been doing to be proactive, I think that's a good, at least information to have before we decide, because who knows when that Police Services Act is gonna come into play? It could be September, it could be 2024, we have no idea. So, I mean, that's the conversation we need to have, all the information before we make realistic decisions, I think. Thank you very much.
My final comment for tonight would be the fact that the here in Perth United Way have succeeded in getting themselves a building in town. I'm not sure if I'm able to speak to where it is. I'm not sure if it's public yet. I have had conversations with them about fundraising off to the side, giving them a hand. So we are moving in a community effort to help those that need help so they don't end up in your back seat. Okay? So thank you very much for coming out, gentlemen. Stick around for the rest of the show if you want, or if you want to leave. Make your way out.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, council, for a good, robust conversation on that. So let's move to the clerk's department, which is the Huron County Mutual Protection Wingham. Are there any questions for Clerk Lamb on this one? Not seeing any questions. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving. Do I have a seconder? I have Rick seconding. All in favor? Carries. 7.1.2, the appointment of bylaw enforcement property standards animal control officer. Again, is there any questions for Clerk Lamb on this one? It was pretty explicit. Go ahead, Anita.
Yes, this is more about wildlife. Is the, like, if coyotes attach sheep or something like that, is the animal control officer going for that, or is that somebody else right now?
So, like if someone was to, what'd you say, catch sheep? Sorry, is it? Or?
Yeah, if a coyote attacks a sheep,
Oh,
and
yeah. So two different functions. So animal control officer in reality in North Huron right now is enforcement of our animal control bylaw, which is strictly canine control.
Okay.
But that being said, council does have a livestock evaluator appointed, which is, for livestock kills. So if anyone was to make a claim under the Ontario Wildlife Damage Compensation Program, we
Yeah,
have
but
a
that's
livestock
after the fact,
evaluator
yeah.
appointed who goes out to those properties and works with the municipalities to fulfill that process. So
Okay.
that money comes back to compensate for the loss of livestock.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Not seeing. Can I have a mover for the appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer? I have Anita, seconder, please. Chris seconds. All in favor? Carries. Nothing for Finance Department. Rec and Community Services. Nothing. Public Works and Facilities. We have the appointment of the Chief Building Officer, Deputy Chief Building Officials, and the Building Inspector. Are there any questions for Mrs. McCarthy? Not seeing any?
Oh, just one.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Chris?
thank you, Reeve. To Jamie, I just need to hear from you that, I wonder why the heck would we have building officials when we've got, Nancy Small, our CBO. But I can understand a little bit about times when she's on holidays, what have you. But there's no cost to having them unless it's you. So it's user, how does it go? User pay?
Through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Palmer, no, there is no retainer fee. There is no cost to any of the deputy chief building officials if we have them as deputy chief building officials. Unless we actually call upon them for a building review or an inspection.
Okay, so if we user pay. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone else. Can I get a mover? I have Kevin Faulkner moving. Seconder, please, would be Rick McBurney. All in favor? Carries. Okay, 7.4.2 is, we need direction for this one, the Blythe signs option. I believe there were 1 to 4. Could we maybe have the Blythe counselor speak to this first? After all, it is your word. Who would like to start? Debbie?
Thank you, Reeve. Like all the options have merit, and we're really coming into this only because there's been discussion about signages and in the past. I'm not sure if the land that's adjacent to the Huron tractor where our sign is now, where the flagpole is, if it would just be simply moved there. If it has to be in a contract for 1 year or 2 years with Huron Tractor not knowing their future of that front portion of the land, and when they're not really sure what the new road allowances are going to take up in that corner. There is a decent amount of land across the roadway for a permanent location, so that's the only comment I have on it.
Go ahead, Rick.
Through you, Bailey. In regards to that, Councillor Faulkner mentioned that we got that reconstruction of the stoplights going in, so we don't know what the lay of the land would look like. Hopefully, maybe it should go across the road on their own property and put a better flagpole in. Flag.
Can either gentleman help me? I do recall, I think when I was a home delivery milkman there, that's where the sign was to begin with, was it not?
Well, there used to be an off-ramp on that corner. There used to be a right-hand turn lane that was removed from there. So I'm not sure what, from what I saw on the proposal, I mean, they were talking on right-hand turn lanes on all four corners, so that's going to take up a considerable amount of more corner or room in that corner. But there's definitely is lots of room for a sign on the property that the township owns in that wedge of property. And I would stand behind a better flagpole too.
So can I just revert back to Jamie? Jamie, have you talked to the county? I'm going to presume you did talk to the county about the changes they're making. I'm not sure where they are. The section that the two gentlemen and I were just talking about, is that available or is that a no?
To answer your question, Ruth Bailey, so that corner area between 25-4 and then
Northeast corner.
Sunset.
like that northeast corner, it actually does
Or
belong.
northwest corner, sorry. Northwest, yeah.
It belongs to the county. It's not township property, but there is going to be quite a good amount of property there where the sign could go. When they changed the option to a traffic signals instead of the roundabout, it really reduced the amount of property they will be taking up. So I haven't spoken to the county right now if we could move that over to their property, but I don't think it would be, when the mention of a roundabout was going to happen, they actually talked to me about moving the sign, and they had mentioned putting it on their property. So I don't think they're going to have any issues if we moved it over.
So what I'm hearing my two Blythe councillors say is they would prefer not to spend the money to move it a little bit on the land it's going to be on now, because that could change in the very near future, and then we're back at another bill. So does my understanding that the gentleman from Blythe would prefer that if Jamie was to just to follow up on the information she's just received at this council about that lot on the west, south, north side of Blythe? My understanding is...
Yeah, their options are leasing options from, with the tenants on the corner where it's on there now. And they're requesting, because they don't know of their future requirements of 1 year or 2 year, and I'm not sure what the length of time for construction. If we have to, go into keep where it is, keeping it now, and go into a 1 year or 2 year leasing agreement with, I'm okay with that. But I think if we have to move it, it would be best on the other side, on property that's not going to be privately owned.
Okay, so Chris, go ahead, and then Anita.
Yeah, I just like the idea, what I'm hearing from our two Blythe gents. I'd say move it now, get permission from county, and get the job done, because we're gonna have to at some point.
Anita, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I think signs in a community or the business cards of the community, they have to look good and nice and be in a really a good spot. I think option 1 is good, 1 or 2 years renewal with your own tractor, and then look next year or the year after for what's possible with the reconstruction of the intersection there. I think that's what Councillor McBurney and Faulkner are looking at too, or not. Option 1?
Yes.
Option 1? Paul, go ahead.
I sort of liked option 4, get it for another year or whatever, and maybe things will fall into place that we'd be able to go and get that part from the county or whatever, but so we didn't have to go and do the build real quick. Let's make sure we have the right spot first of all, and we have a year, we could get it for a year. That's just my thought, the option 4, but I'm.
So I'm kind of hearing option 1 from 3 councillors, option 4, I'm going to go back to Kevin.
And maybe, so I guess to clarify the difference between option 1 and 4 is, so option 1 would be a 2-year, we would bring back a 2-year lease agreement with Huron Tractor, and the director would also prepare a report to come back to council on potential options for where the sign could be located. Option 4 is we would bring back a 1 or 2 year lease agreement renewal with Huron Tractor, but instead of bringing a report in regard to options, we would await more information from Huron Tractor on what their future plans are and whether they even need us to relocate the sign at all.
So I think then, go ahead, Kevin.
I'll make a motion to accept option number 1.
Do I have a seconder? You need a seconds? Last chance for conversation. Go ahead, Trevor.
My comment is that, I mean, I'm more to the point of option number 4 than number 1, only because the way I look at it is typically when in most municipalities, at least what I've seen, is a welcome sign is on the right-hand side of the road, not on the left side of the road. And, I mean, moving a sign for the sake of just moving a sign because it's won't be on private property, if the users, if Huron Tractor doesn't need their land, then what's the point? But if Huron Tractor needs the land, then I can understand moving it. So my position is wait for Huron Tractor to establish, you know, if we want to put a reserve in place in the budget to have that potential, where we're stating in order for the potential, if that ever comes up, then great. But in my mind, you know, Huron Tractor right now has not told us that they need that piece of property. They're potentially expanding, but we just heard right now they're expanding the other way. So there's been no communication. So I would be more apt to go with option 4, and then in my comments, Reeve, I will be voting that away.
Okay, so right now I have a motion on the floor for 1. Option 1, is it not? Anita, go ahead, sorry.
Yes, that's right. My question was, I think there's no talk in this about moving the sign. It's more for repairing the sign, no matter where it is. If you have whatever option you do it.
Relocate. It says relocate.
So we have option 1 on the floor. We have a mover and a seconder. So I'm going to let Kevin speak, and then we should vote on it.
I was just wondering, I don't disagree with the option 4 either. Can I withdraw my motion? Or, it doesn't matter, we go to a vote, no vote.
Yeah, so you're the mover of the motion, and Councillor Van Heersum
Okay.
is the seconder, so
So
you can
through.
make an amendment to your motion if Councillor Van Heersum's in favor of it, and then put it to a vote.
Yeah.
Or
Probably
your
just
other
as quick-
option is to just
probably just quick
vote
go to a
against
vote now.
your own
Yeah.
motion,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Let's just go.
Thank you.
Oh, the director has her hand up there. I don't know if you can
Okay,
see
I'm
her.
going to go to Trevor first, because you can see him, then to you, Vicky.
So, but however, and I think as the Councillor Van Henderson has mentioned, the report indicates the north and south Blythe signs, which has a Friends of the Village request to update them. So every part of the options that we were talking about didn't talk about actually the beautification or the update of the signs. It just talks about the moving. So I'm not sure where the PowerPoint presentation of the Friends of the Village is in the options. And I mean, I definitely would suggest if we're not going to move the sign, or if we are planning on moving the sign, don't beautify it and then move it. That would not be, in my opinion, an appropriate use of funds. But I think in my mind is, if the Friends of the Village have had recommendations, and from all intents and purposes, I don't have any issues with their recommendations. I mean, they're the people who are more apt on this stuff. I think everything they're asking for is legitimate, as long as the Director of Public Works and staff don't have any massive concerns about what they're particularly doing. I don't have any concern. But that's, I think, where Councillor Van Henderson was questioning as well, because all we talked about is whether we're going to move the sign or not necessarily the beautification of what the Friends of the Village were talking about. So maybe the Director of Public Works can add to that.
Jamie?
Yes, thank you. So on option 1, it would be to renew the lease agreement for 2 years and direct staff for possible new locations in 2023 with their associated costs. And then,
Option 4?
As noted above, the remaining funds is approximately $1,500. So the amount of work that they want to complete to the south sign is above and beyond what's currently remaining in budget. But if we kept it there and we spend the $1,500 or more on beautifying the sign, and then in 2 years' time, Huron Tractor does expand, then that money doesn't, then we would have to spend that money again, potentially, once we move the sign. And then in option 4, we would renew the lease again for the 1 to 2 years, and then it doesn't go into whether or not staff will be spending money on beautification, but that at that point I can report back to say, this is where we're going to renew it for 2 years, and we'll wait to see what happens with Huron Tractor. But there's only so much money currently budgeted in the parks budget, so we're probably not going to move forward with any beautification on the south sign, and we'll just focus on the north sign.
So can I ask if we've had this conversation with the Friends of the Village or the BIAs?
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're fully aware.
Can you tell me which way the Friends of the Village were going?
When I spoke with the Friends of the Village of Blythe, they had indicated that they would like to continue to beautify the north end sign, but try to find a resolution that doesn't solely depend on the decision of Huron Tractor.
And which one of these options would get us closest to that?
Option 2.
So option 2 would be the preferred, my understanding is option 2 would be the preferred way to go for the Friends of the Village that are going to do the beautifying.
That's correct.
Okay. So we went from 1 to 4
to
2, right? Okay, so here's the decision we have to make. The Friends of the Village have brought this forward, and they want to do certain things, and that falls into option 2. That's my understanding. They are the people that are going to do this and take care of this. It is their village. So should we not go that way? Go ahead, Trevor.
So, Reeve, it is all of our village, not just the Friends of the Village of Blythe. It's everybody's village. I mean, it's everybody's money. I don't disagree with you. I mean, they are a volunteer group who are requesting funds that we've technically budgeted. What I'm also hearing from is we don't have enough budget to do option 2 if the way we budgeted today.
Okay.
So in my mind, option 4 is a possibility with the conversation of coming back to budget in 2023 with knowing this proposal that the Friends of the Village would like to do and incorporate it into the budget somehow so that we're not having to try to find funds or do something that away. I mean, by picking option 4, we're not saying Friends of the Village no. We're saying it's just not available to be done in 2022 because we don't have the proper funding in our budget today. And as the Director of Public Works is more than aware, she can bring it back to the budget deliberations that we have, and we can make a priority as to whether that's within the budget or not. I mean, I think that's, I'm definitely not saying no because they're a volunteer group, and I think that they're important to the municipality. I think budget is going to play a part of it. Here in Tractor is going to play a part of it. There's a lot of variables here. So by us having option 4, I think gives us more flexibility than not. But again, we do have a motion on the floor, and let that motion go where it is, and then we'll determine what we're going to do from there.
Director Jamie, you wanted to speak to this.
Yes, thank you, Reeve Bailey. Just to clarify, option 2 is renewing the lease agreement for 1 year and then in 2023 budget for the move.
Thank you very kindly. So I'm going to ask the clerk to read back the motion on the floor.
So the current motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated July 18, 2022 regarding signage at the north and south entrances to Blythe, and further that that Council directs staff to proceed with option number 1 as outlined in staff report PW 2022-18.
So I'm going to ask the mover and the second of that, did they want to withdraw that, or do they want to leave it standing for a vote?
I would like to withdraw that.
I'd like to remove it.
So we have a withdrawal.
Yep. So if someone wants to put a different motion on the
Would
floor.
somebody like to put a different motion on the floor? Trevor?
Based on the conversation that the Director of Public Works just mentioned, I will put a motion on the floor for option number 2.
Kevin Faulkner seconds.
Second that.
Because the conversation is in 2023. The budget is going to be talked about in 2023. That's the reason why I'm saying that.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor, duly seconded. Any more conversation on it? Then I'm going to call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Okay.
Reed?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make comment. I mean, I want to appreciate we did go around the horn a lot of that. And I mean, I appreciate the directors, sometimes when we have commingled decisions or issues, it becomes very unknown or understanding about where it is. So I appreciate the director at least, helping us through the process about where we are at, and 2023 discussion I think is going to be an important one.
Absolutely. Another great conversation. Everybody participated. We've got it all aired and viewed, and we're giving proper information by our staff. We thank them very kindly for that. Okay, moving on to 7.5, we have nothing. 7.6, the first one is 7.6.1, policing service arrangement for the Wingham Ward. Okay, so on this one here, I believe I did hear somebody say they wanted to have a conversation. I'll ask for a mover and seconder, and then we'll have...
So again, that's another one where staff
Different
required
things,
direction.
yes. Sorry.
So we are looking, so you heard from the OPP, and then the CAO has the report. So I guess if there's any questions for the CAO, but otherwise, if not, we require direction on whether council wants to us to bring back anything related to enhanced service, or whether you want council's desirous of rolling into the billing model.
Okay, I think we had quite a robust conversation about this a few minutes ago. And I do believe the majority of council think it's time to roll it into the billing process. Trevor, can you just refresh us? You're the director of the police board for North Huron for Wingham Ward. Can you please just run us by your thoughts and how you feel it should roll out?
Yeah, I was very clear about when I taught. I mean, the real question though is that this is not, going forward, this is not a Wingham Ward discussion. It's not.
No.
It's a Township of North Huron discussion because we're all going to be under the same impression. The real question I think that we need as counselors to understand is there an enhancement that the OPP could offer that counselors may be interested? I don't know if anybody knows any of the potential enhancements that you could ask for. So it might not hurt. It may not hurt. We're not going to make a decision on a 10.1 or a 5.1 tonight anyways. It might be interesting for counselors because who are not, as up to date as the billing model and all this stuff, is to understand there are municipalities out there, Goderich being one of them, I believe, they have enhancements. So they actually have an enhancement that they pay for in order to have it. So, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to ask the question about what the enhancements are. But I also want to understand is that this conversation about, because of the conversation of how service level, because this was the same discussion we had 3.5 years ago, is we aren't really getting a different level of service. It's just a different service. It's not the Wingham Police Service, it's the OPP. We're not getting a different level of service. Just how we're paying for it and how the province is recovering those costs. So, for me, I think for full transparency and full accountability to the ratepayers of North Huron, I think, we need to make sure the transparency's approach to the North Huron residents is understand wherever we go, this is not going to be area rated anymore. So it's not going to be the town of Wingham paying for whatever. It's going to be everybody paying for all the having of the police service in the municipality. So whatever this enhancement is, we need to ask the questions if those enhancements can be established because of Blythe and East Wawash as well. I don't know a lot of these questions. I think these are some of these questions we need to have. So to answer your question, I think there's still some questions that need to be had. There's been a lot of good information presented by the CAO as it relates to costs and how the billing model is established and what that discussion is. But there hasn't been really much discussion about what possible enhancements could the township ask for and what that cost would be to understand whether they actually would want that enhancement. And I think that's a fair assessment. That still needs to happen.
Kevin, just before I get it over to you, I just want to comment my thoughts on this. So when Trevor talks about enhancements, that's like saying we want a police officer to walk up and down the main street of Wingham, where I think then the Wingham Ward would have to pay extra for that enhancement because it's not of any concern to anybody else. I would think an enhancement is if you guys said all of a sudden, we need to have more ride programs, and East Wawash wanted to, then they should be paying the extra because that's an enhancement. I just heard 3 gentlemen stand here and tell me they couldn't find enough work for their police officers that they had here now. And that's why we got a rebate in the Wingham Ward. I just heard 3 officers say there's going to be a certain level that will all get the same amount. You call 911. If an officer drives by your house in Blythe once a day, he's going to drive by a Wingham house once a day. Not 16 times in Wingham and never in East Wawash. They will drive by East Wawash. We will all have the same amount of coverage for the same amount of price based on volume, right? Well, the volume is our population, and we're all getting the same coverage now. So it should be we all pay for the same coverage, right? Because we're all getting the same coverage now. There's no excuse to go any other way. Because when you call the police, they're going to come, and they're going to bill us extra. And if East Wawash was called 500 times, then North Huron should pay for the 500 times. If it's Blythe, then we all should pay together. It's time that it becomes one universal OPP situation. Clearly heard them say there wasn't enough work for Wingham, so I have never had a complaint about the OPP. Paul, I'll pick up on you after I take Kevin, okay? And I think they're doing a good job. And for me to say that after the site I took 3 or 4 years ago, it took a lot of convincing to get this Irishman over there. But it's working. It's working for all of us, and I don't see any reason for any one of our wards to want to have something extra. Having said that, please tell me. I'm going to start with Kevin.
Thank you, Reeve. I have just 2 comments to make. One, I've had no complaints issued to me about, and in my own personal thoughts on the policing, I'm quite happy with the policing that we've had for the last 5 or 10 years now in the contract that we have. That being said, I'm not against enhancements. If anyone would bring a reasonable cause forward for enhancements, all I would say is I am not against, or I am against an enhancement where you have police officers walking up and down the main street of Wingham and not the main street of Blythe or Belgrave or in the patrolling the East Walnut. I don't see a need for a different level for different parts of our municipality. So but I'm happy with what we have right now.
Thank you. Paul, then Anita.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Yes, I understand the way the Ken gentleman said to us that our level's not going to go down. I was very happy to hear that. But my question is, and I'm not sure I'm missing something here. I see where we're all the same, paying the same amount, you're saying. But that's not what our figures are saying here. It's what I can't put together that.
That's what it is now.
I'm going to have the CEO answer that, please.
That's not the
Okay,
contract.
thank you. So,
Yeah, so I'm able to help in terms of, so you'll notice Blythe right now is sitting around 300,000, okay? And there's 971 households. And there's 2 components to your billing model. There's the base service, and then there's your call for service. So your base service is your number of households times, and you'll notice there's a base rate chart there, 2017 to 2022. And you'll notice the base rate is decreasing, or has been decreasing. So if you take 971 and multiply it, for example, by 172.07, that should get you to the 309, or sorry, that gets you to 167 for Blythe. So your base rate in Blythe is 167, or Blythe, East Wamanosh. For the 2 wards, your base rate is 167. You have been paying around 300,000. So what that tells me is that you've had $142,000 worth of calls for service. So your calls for service and your base rate comprise the entire cost for Blythe and East Wamanosh. In comparison, Wingham has 1,431 households times the $172.07, which brings you to 246,000 compared to the 167 in Blythe. So you're comparing base to base. And in terms of your calls for service for Blythe is 142,000, just using the numbers that we have in front of us. But you have more calls for service in Wingham because you have more population. And so if you go back to data that the OPP were doing back in 2017, 2018, your calls for service were actually running you about $450,000. So it's just been adjusted to accommodate for inflation and those sort of things. So it's estimated for 2023 at 525, but that it might be 550, it might be 400 for Wingham. It really depends on your calls for service, but your base does not change. So at a minimum, you're paying 246 in Wingham, and in Blythe, you're paying a minimum of 167. How much more you pay depends on your calls for service, which goes back to Inspector Union's comment. If you're more proactive in your efforts, then that theoretically will reduce your calls for service. So I don't know if does that help, Paul?
Paul, does that help you?
I think so.
Or have I confused?
So all I'm saying is that as long as I see that each house is paying the same amount for the base service, right? That's all I missed them saying, they said it in there and I missed.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all fine.
Yeah.
Today's the day for questions. Anita, you were next.
Yes, thank you very much, Reeve Bailey. I would like to know what the enhancements are, if those are full-time persons, part-time persons, if they have so many different subdivisions right now, so more people are in mental health, more people are in whatever, property crime. So if there is a choice, you can have a part-time, more like a social worker that is related to the police. I don't know if that's possible. I would like to know what choice you have in enhancements.
And I don't believe I've seen a list of the enhancements. 'Cause
No.
you got it.
And that's the same thing that's...
Dictated by the needs of the municipality. And so, for example, like, a lot of it is covered in your base service. So, for example, ride programs, traffic safety, community policing, intelligence gathering, like, the CAO has a number of those listed there. But generally, your enhancements are based on what you're looking for as a municipality. That's above and beyond your base service of what's offered and your calls for service. So I guess not to put the CAO on the spot, but it might be a challenge for him to bring back a report on the enhancement options without having a sense of what council's looking for in regard to enhancements in the first place.
Well, the enhancement that I was looking for is if we are going to open up a house for homeless or drug addictions or something like that, and we see already that Josephine Street has the highest amount of crimes in Wingham area, then somebody with some experience in that might be an enhancement that the people of Wingham would like. But I don't know if that's an option or not.
So just going back
Or
to...
is that covered in your base rate that like we can expect more calls there, so the OPP is more visible in Wingham than anyway.
So just to follow up on what Anita just said, then enhancements to me would be they're going to tell us they're giving us 4 ride programs and we're going to ask for 6. That would be an enhancement. According to what I just heard here, an enhancement would be for something totally different. To your point, it's a good point. Can we find out that if the United Way opens up this center and all of a sudden they've got to call the police because they open the center up 10 times a month, does the Wingham Ward have to pay extra money because that's an enhancement?
No.
Or if they have one of their officers, got to be careful on this one, if they have one of their officers at the United Way, is that a bill to us, or is that United Way an agreement they have with United Way?
Well, it's not always about money, because it's also about prevention. Because there is an officer there, maybe the whole community is safer because the officer is there. But is that a base rate or is that an enhancement?
That's what I'm wondering, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so through your worship, just in terms of, so if the connection center, like, say, establishes in the downtown,
Yeah.
and they call for service, that would fall under the calls for service provisions, and
Okay.
you would be charged for it under the billing model, under the calls for service.
Okay.
But if you wanted, for example, that, and I'm not suggesting this, but I'm just using this as an example, the connection center is open Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and you decide that you want a higher police presence on the main street Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, that would constitute an enhancement.
Okay.
Because that resource is not needed there. The police resources are there for calls for service.
Right.
The police will have somebody there if we as municipality want them there. So if we want somebody there Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, or we want somebody to patrol the main streets, half days, full days, then they would acquire the resources. So they'll say, okay, we'll provide you with an officer who will walk up and down the streets, 40 hours a week, or whatever the number is, and they will bill us directly for that cost.
And that's
So
the
that's
enhancement.
above and beyond. You have your base service, your calls for service, and that enhancement is above and beyond that.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I can just follow up, and I'm not sure whether to ask you, Trevor, or the CAO. Supposing we sign this contract and we're into it for a year, then we realize we need an enhancement. Can we?
There would be no contract signed.
Oh, okay. So forget the contract part then. When we're into this, say a year from now, we found out that whatever we're doing, something went wrong, and we need more help. Can we ask for it a year from
You
now?
can ask for enhancements at any time.
Yes.
It's not a big deal right now then?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, the idea of the enhancement is, I look at the billing model as a fixed fee,
Yep.
and there's a fixed fee component, and there's a variable fee. The base rate is charged to the municipality regardless of you have one police officer even step foot in your municipality. You are getting paid that you're paying that base rate regardless. So think of it that way. The base rate is just to have the possibility of calling the OPP to your municipality. The calls for service is the variable portion. It's the variable portion in which there's a price established to every different call. It's not all the same cost, it's a different cost per call based on their model. An enhancement would be adding to the fixed. So you're paying for it regardless of whether you've asked for it, you're going to get it, and that's what you're going to ask for. You know, I mean, I believe Goddard used the idea is they wanted an actual satellite office. So they actually have a satellite office that town of Goderich pays for. That's an enhancement that you could ask for. That's an example. Is that an example that we would have? Is it necessary? I would tell you there's people on the police services board that would say, yes, it is necessary. There's other ones that don't. So that has been the conversation in this municipality since the Bristol Terrace location was ceased and the new big administration building in Clinton happened. That's been a conversation since that's happened. So I just think it's a conversation about what I think examples of what enhancements could be need to be vetted against what the necessary needs are of this municipality. And I mean, we've been given a lot of good data from the detachment commander about what incidents are happening in North Huron and Wingham specifically. I think ultimately where it really boils down to is that, you know, we haven't had any of those enhancements today. In my mind, we haven't had any of those enhancements. All we've had is we've been paying for 7 full-time equivalent officers and then them giving us a rebate because they haven't needed, for the calls of service don't dictate to have 7 full-time equivalent people. So I think ultimately but my conversation is really about more being transparent to the public, because the public doesn't necessarily know what enhancements are available to them. And I think it's important that we are transparent with the public to understand what the level of service they're getting, and they're not getting any different. The OPP model is based on need. They send officers to the most need in the municipality. So if there's a lot of incidences in northwest corner of Huron County, that's where they send a lot of officers. If there's no need for them in the southwest corner, they don't send them there. They patrol, but the vast majority of police doesn't go there. So I mean, that's a conversation about what the base rate is. So I mean, I agree with the clerk's response about, you know, it's going to be hard for the CAO to tell us what enhancements that we have, because there's a number of things we could all ask. But I think we also have to look at ourselves and say, we don't have those enhancements now, is there a need? So, I mean, I think, you know, providing us with some examples during the report wouldn't be a bad idea, but I think they got to be looked at as examples, not, you know, pigeonhole this to fit this municipality.
So really, the motion that we have on the floor actually pretty well says that. In the end, it says, "The further the council directs staff regarding enhancements for the OPP." Well, we're going to direct them to see if they can come back with a list. That's my understanding. We're not telling them that we're going to go to the OPP and we want somebody walking up and down the main street of Belgrade. Do I understand that right?
Well, no, so you would have to, basically, we're looking for direction regarding council's thoughts as it relates to enhanced OPP policing services. So I guess potential options at this point are directing staff to transition to the OPP billing model, or direct staff to prepare a report regarding potential enhancements prior to making a decision on the OPP billing model.
I'm going to go to Chris, and then I'm going to ask a question of Trevor after that.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, I was going to say, we've been getting along well without the enhancements, and like like Dwayne said, what would you call it? Financial or future considerations, we could save a lot of money by not using these enhancements if we didn't make that deal. It's been working well. We've had a good run with the OPP in all the wards. It seems to be, yes, there's problems. There's going to be problems everywhere, but they come. So that's important to me, and I feel confident in that. So it's like getting options when you buy a car. It's too easy to say, oh yeah, I like that, and that. Yes, the cost will be too much, and we have to consider that very much. Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, through you. Some enhancements in their model are only beneficial to individual settlements. Having an officer walk down Main Street of Wingham does nothing for East Wallinash, or Blythe, but you're going to be asking the ratepayers to pay for that.
Yep.
So that's all we have to keep in mind is, unless there's a way of equally, putting options around it, the entire
Yep.
municipality.
So we don't have enhancements now. We have them for 3 years. So I would recommend that we just use the first part of this 7.6.1. That the report of the CAO dated July 18, 2022 regarding OPP policing service arrangements for the Wing Ward be received for information purposes. And then Trevor, how would you like to word that to follow through with going to the level that's the same as everybody else? Forget the enhancements. We can go at that when we need
If that was
them.
the case, then it would say, and further that council directs staff to transition to the OPP billing model.
Did you want to go that far right now?
And that's, listen, I am supportive of what council decides.
Okay.
And as I'm listening to people communicate and talk here, it might not hurt to have that, to carry on with that process, but through arrangements in the Police Services Board, as well as when the board becomes one board, when the Police Act changes, then we have the conversations with the detachment commander at that time that says, you have certain issues in certain places in the municipality, the county. How can enhancements support your needs? And that's be a conversation. I mean, then the county model of the community safety and well-being plan gets used in a more realistic approach rather than let's put a Band-Aid on something that we don't really know what the issues are. I mean, my conversation about being transparent was just making sure that we understand what benefits are out there. I mean, we haven't had them yet. So, I mean, the conversation is you don't know what you're buying if you don't know. But I don't disagree with, if you haven't had it, why do we carry on without it? And then as we have these issues pop up, that's what the Police Services Board is for. I mean, me and Rick are more than happy to take issues or concerns from ratepayers or residents and councillors to back to the detachment commander to say, we've got these pockets or issues. Is there something we can provide you or you can provide us? And if it costs us more money, then let's bring that back to council and talk about an enhancement at that time. Maybe that's the right answer. So, I mean, I'm at the pleasure of as I'm not going to speak for Rick, as Councilor McBurney, but I mean, as a Police Services Board chair and a member, we're willing to do what we need to do to satisfy the service and the residents who are getting that service. That's the intent, and that's always my intent, is that because the Police Service Board has no bearing on cost. It's solely operational. So all costs are coming back here. Okay, so I mean, I can agree. I can agree that the motion can be that we just transition to a 5.1. It may be that council doesn't want to make that decision now, And maybe they want to just defer that part of the decision until they've had time to digest it. I don't know.
So Kevin, can I just go back to you for a second then? Does that satisfy your point where you're saying, and I agree with you, that if this one ward needs something special, you're saying all 3 wards should not be paying for it?
No, I didn't say that. I just said, it said if it was specific to one,
sorry,
a specialty for
sorry.
one.
Yeah.
I mean,
An enhancement.
you know, a drug crime is the same as a drug crime in Blythe as it is in Wingham, but don't treat them, don't come and put a special drug thing in Wingham and not have them, you know, all I'm saying is, it should be an overall enhancement.
Okay.
Not a specific
Okay,
enhancement.
and then we can deal with that, or the next council can deal that as it comes along, because it's an open conversation for council to agree or not to agree on it, on enhancement as we move along. Okay, could we get that motion read and see if I can come up with a mover and seconder?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, and again, feel free to correct me if this is not what you're looking for, but the motion right now would be that the report of the CEO dated July 18th, 2022 regarding OPP policing service arrangements for the Wingham Ward be received for information purposes. And further, that council directs staff to transition the Wingham Ward to the OPP billing model without any service enhancements.
That's what I understood. Is everybody okay?
Yeah, the only one that's changing is the Wingham Ward. We've already had.
Correct.
That's right.
Blythe and East Wallanosh
So it really
remain the same.
depends on
Wingham
these
would
two.
transition to the same as Blythe. And again, if there was a time when council or the next council wanted to have a discussion on service enhancements and what that would look like, that can occur at any time.
So we're good. Could I have a, go ahead, Paul?
Through you, Reeve. Yeah, I agree with that. He really explained it to me. I thought that we're getting into a cost there, but we're not. And we're getting number one service, and he promised that, so
Yep.
I'm agree with that for our constituents in town.
Thank you kindly. Do I have a mover? Did you want to ask a question, Chris?
No, I like it. I'd like to hear it again, though.
Okay, one more time, sir.
Yeah, well, maybe if you want to get a mover and a seconder first, and then I'll read it back.
I'll move it.
I have Chris moving, seconder, please. Trevor seconds, thank you.
So again, your motion on the floor is that the report of the CAO dated July 18th, 2022 regarding OPP police servicing, police servicing or policing service arrangements for the Wingham Ward be received for information purposes. And further, that council directs staff to transition the Wingham Ward to the OPP billing model without any service enhancements.
We have a mover and a seconder. I now call a vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 7.6.2, the Next Generation 911 Service Agreement. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving, seconder, please. Second time for seconder. Rick seconds. I'm going to open it up for questions, comments, or concerns on this one. Who would like to speak to it? Seeing no one. Second and last chance. Seeing no one. I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Correspondence, council's report, Reeves activity report. So, it was a great municipal night, and I actually wrote this down so I don't forget any of it. It was a great municipal night at the Blythe Theatre Harvest Stage, and it was good to have North Huron active again. Also was Saturday's Ride for the Dad, the first time having this in North Huron, and it was a fundraiser for prostate cancer research. There were 60 riders. This ride has given over $35 million to research. Thanks to Angie and the organizers for bringing it to North Huron this year. I want to take a moment and speak to some flags and sign issues on the main street of Wingham. At the last Memorial Remembrance Day, I spoke on behalf of all of North Huron on our deep gratitude to the fallen that have given the freedoms that we have in Canada. As I started speaking, I looked up to the crowd, and just above them over their head, the Canadian flag was flying upside down in front of Buck and Joe's restaurant on the corner, right across the street. Obviously, the owner, Steve Hill, has no moral compass. It seems to have progressed through the year, and he is now boldly showing the full F word in different places in his main street windows, the flags outside, the T-shirts, on both of his sites, on the websites. I stood and took a 47-second video in front of his open restaurant Went back, sat in my truck, sending it to the counselors, the staff, and the authorities for 10 minutes, and he never appeared till I was driving away, and then he was standing in his restaurant behind his wife, taking pictures of me waving at him as I drove off. We, the Council of North Huron, the staff, the BIAs, the Economic Development Team, or any church but his own, do not endorse him and his actions. He's a liar in that claim. He is a liar. Yes, I have the right to speak too. I have the freedom of speech too. We do live in a democracy of free speech, but I would bet our forefathers would never have seen this outright stupidity coming. I want to apologize for what the public has had to endure, but we, your council, have to obey the laws of the land, and we have to take the proper legal look into all offensive issues. On another note, your Reeve was asked to and did speak on CBC Tonight with Janelle Massa last Thursday about emergency closures in the hospital and its implications moving forward on our small communities. I suggested they talk to the warden of Huron County. Hussein called back later and said her producer wanted the Reeve of North Huron to speak about the impact and the ratification to the hospitals, unable to staff their hospitals. The hospitals, the factories, farming, commercial, schools, yes, including hospitals, but there is nowhere for these newcomers to live. We have no houses. So how do we keep the hospital open when we can't even staff it? We need housing, and this sitting council has worked hard on this issue. This is what the world sees the community of North Huron and its council as: thoughtful, progressive, forward-thinking, building for a long-term future after we have left our council seats. Not about some single hillbilly on one of our main streets. Council, staff, and the citizens of North Huron, the future is positive. Let's move forward together. Let's continue spending our time making North Huron friendly and prosperous. Thank you. Council member reports, verbal or written updates for anybody sitting on boards and committees. No one tonight? Okay, we'll move on. Comments by members. Is there any comments any members like to make? Anita, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Reeve Bailey. On July the 14th, I went to the celebration of the completion of the Scott Municipal Drain Restoration Demonstration Project. And there were many landowners, people who worked in any capacity on the drain, Maiden Valley staff, and also we were very fortunate to have a Minister of Agriculture, Lisa Thompson, there. Cooperation between conservation authorities and agricultural landowners to support watershed resiliency and protecting farmland is a unique experience, and North Huron can be very proud to have this demonstration project in our community, in our municipality. After the celebration, we had a tour of the whole project. It was enormous, it was beautiful, and it looked very well. So I would like to thank Melanie Pletch, Wilma Scott and their families again to follow through on the vision of their husband and father, Murray Scott.
Thank you very kindly.
It was a wonderful day.
And thank you for attending that for us. Any other councillors? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes, Reeve, I just wasn't sure I was going to say anything tonight or not, but I want to take this opportunity to agree with the Reeve in the sense that, you know, we have to abide by certain rules and laws in this country. And freedom of speech is one of those laws that I'm accepting of. If you have an opinion, you have an opinion. I don't necessarily agree with everybody's opinion, but I respect their opinion. It's how they are how they show that opinion really shows me what type of individual they are. And no matter what affiliation you are, conservative, liberal, NDP, it doesn't necessarily matter in the sense of this is where we are in society, and we see this in political politics all the time. If it's not if it isn't the decision or a suggestion of the political team that is the governing body of the day, it isn't well received. We see that in federal politics, we see that in provincial politics. We have to understand that as politicians, municipal, federal, or provincial, we are here to represent the people. That's what we're here for. As municipal leaders, we are more in terms of what that means to people than any other political affiliation there is. Because we generally live in the same place in which we govern. Right? So, in no way, shape, or form do I condone anything that anybody has about how they determine what's right or what's wrong in their particular business. And as the read has indicated, I think we have to recognize that that particular movement has been throughout this municipality over the past 8 years, probably 12 years, has been a part of this municipality. That's just been reality. I think this municipality has grown in the sense of we aren't here to pick a fight. That's not what we're here for. What we're here for is to move the municipality forward, to do what we need to do in order to become successful for our ratepayers. That's what we're here for. I'm not here to pick a fight with a resident or a ratepayer or a business owner or whatever. You have your opinion. You may think we are not doing our job. That is fine. You have that right. And as I said before, October 24th, which I believe is the election day, is coming. And as of today, this municipality has 5 people that are running currently, as I've put in my nomination papers today. So, as I've indicated, if you don't like what you're seeing on the TV or the computer, feel free to put your name in the ring. And the very dedication about being in the political office, in the municipal government, is you can have an opinion and make solid change. But you also have to sell it to 6 other people and get them on your side. This is not a dictatorship. You can't just force your way to do what you think is right. So, arguably, what is very difficult in our day and age is we've got a councilor event, a municipal council members event, that I can tell you that I've been talking to the people of the county and the municipality. There's more staff there than there is people. This is not, this job here, there's not a lot of people lining up to do it. And why is that? Because it is a thankless job. You get thanked once, maybe, in 4 years, but you crapped on every night about the decisions that you make. Because I can tell you right now, before I put my election papers in, I had a conversation with my employer. And I asked them, I'm being transparent. I'm running again. I want to make sure you're comfortable with that, because I'm still a full-time employed person. And my boss came to me and said, We completely support you. But we've got individuals that are asking you, are you nuts? I have friends that say the same thing. But those are the same people that have a real opinion about where we are as a municipality. And I'm okay with answering their questions, and I'm okay with having a debate. What I'm not okay with is that you're not willing to stand up here and have a fruitful discussion about an issue that you think is a problem. And that's what I believe that we're talking about, as the Reeve has indicated today. If you're going to stand behind free speech, fine, stand behind it. But you're not going to provide anybody in the municipality with any support to help change the views of what people we need to do and what we need to change. Some of the things we can't change as municipal people. I can't change the COVID rules. I couldn't change them if I wanted to. I tried. So, arguably, we are in a good position. This municipality has moved things forward with the good work that staff and this council has done. Do I have to say that this next council is going to be the same way? I hope so. As long as we respect each other and work together and represent our constituents to the best of our ability, what can go wrong? Like, really, what can go wrong? And I know I've said this, this is probably the third council meeting that I've had this comments by member that I have to reiterate. I hate having to do it all the time. But I mean, this is the facts. And let's continue to celebrate the things that are good in this municipality and not the things that aren't. Because those things are going to be there forever, and until they decide to be part of the conversation and not hide behind something else, we're not going to move them forward. So I appreciate you giving me that time, Reeve. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Firm believer of free speech. We were given it, and there's many ways of extending your free speech to the public. And as the Reeve mentioned, that individual's way was maybe not the best. But I would say the best way, this is politically speaking, the best way to get your voice out there is vote. Just doesn't matter whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal, just get out there and vote. Then you're speaking, you're truly speaking. And regarding what Reeve, you brought up about workers and what have you, everywhere you go, there's signs. And you're wondering, why? It wasn't like that before, like pre-pandemic. You know, the odd sign, but holy smokes, it's everywhere. I was in one of the local drive-in stores, restaurants, and I saw a lady who had to have been in her 80s helping me. And I thought, good for you, girl. Like, wow. But it was sad that she had to work. There's that, or she wanted to. It was one or the other. But where were all the youth who used to be working there and learning a trade, learning how to deal with people and stuff? And I'm just wondering, where are they? You know, you have ideas, and some of them you don't want to say, make public. But I'm really bothered, offended by the fact that there's so many openings out there, because we know the people are there to work. We know they're there. The population is there. Are they sitting on their duffs? Are they already making too much money in other ways? Like, what is it? Like, it's just, I hope we find an answer to it someday.
Thank you very much, Chris. Anyone else? Not seeing any. Let's go to notice of motion. Does anybody have a notice of motion? Not seeing any. Bylaws, bylaw number 72-2022, tower rental agreement with Blackburn Media. Do I have a mover?
And maybe I'll just clarify. So this is the one that was deferred at the last meeting. So now changes have been made to the agreement, so it is only between North Huron and Blackburn Media, and Morris Turnberry will be entering into a separate agreement between their municipality and Blackburn Media.
Do I have a mover then? Kevin moves. Rick seconds. You good with that? All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 74, 2022, appointment by bylaw officer, protection standards offer. Do I have a mover? I have Anita moving. I have Paul seconding. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 75, 2022, appointment of animal control officer. Do I have a mover? Chris moves. Kevin seconds. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 76, 2022, adoption of special events policy and procedure manual. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor Sipes moving, Kevin seconding. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 77, 2022, appointment of chief building inspector. Do I have a mover? I have Anita moving. I have Paul seconding. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 78, 2022, appointment of deputy chief building officials. Do I have a mover? Rick moves, seconder please. Paul seconds, all in favor? Carries, thank you. Bylaw number 79, 2022, appointment of building, the first one was chief, deputy chief, and this one is the building inspectors. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving, Kevin seconding, all in favor? Carries, thank you. Announcement, the next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, August 8, 2022 at 6 p.m. at the North Huron Town Hall Theatre. A Property Standards Committee meeting will be held on Monday, July 25th at 2022 at 5 p.m. in the North Huron Town Hall Theatre. A special council meeting will be held on Monday, July 25th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the North Huron Town Hall Theatre. The next Economic Development and Recovery Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, July 21st, 2022 at 2 p.m. in the North Huron Town Hall Theatre. The next Wingham BIA Board meeting will be held on Thursday, August 18th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. in the Hot Stove Lounge in North Huron Westcast Community Complex. The next Blythe BIA meeting will be held on Thursday, August 25th, 2022 at 8 a.m. at the Blythe District Community Center. Other business. Not seeing any closed sessions. We do not have. 14.1, confirmatory bylaw number 80, 2022. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving, Kevin seconding. All in favor? Carries. Adjournment, that the Council Township of North Huron agrees being no further business before council. The meeting is hereby adjourned at
8:42 p.m.
8:42 p.m. Rex first, and who's second? Kevin second. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Everyone have a safe, good week. See you next week.